So my entire life, my mom has been a music teacher. When I was really, really young, she taught like piano and voice lessons in our house. She has a master's degree in music education. She's taught college students their music class. She's taught future music teachers how to be music teachers. When I was your age, she taught elementary school music. Right now, she is a middle school music teacher in Arkansas. And so my whole life, that's just been who she is and what she does. And I'll never forget one of the stories that she told me about when she was teaching elementary age kids. When you're in elementary, you may not even remember, but you're just figuring out how school even works in the first place. And she told me this time about a kindergarten class. It was the first day of school, or the first day they had music. And that's kind of a terrifying time, because as a kindergartner, like, you don't really know what school even is. You don't know these kids. You don't know these adults. You don't know the spaces that you're in. And so it was the first day that she had this kindergarten class, and she's going through and she's calling roll and taking attendance and marking who's there and who's not there. And she gets through with that, and she looks out in the class and sees this little kindergarten boy who's just kind of like a little afraid, and she realizes, like, I didn't call his name. So she said, "Oh, hey, buddy, I don't think I called your name, did I?" And he was, "Oh, okay, well, what's your name?" And he goes, "John Winters." And so she goes and she checks her roll for John Winters. And there's no John Winters on the class attendance sheet, which is, obviously, as you could imagine, sparks a few alarms, some mental, like, uh-oh, what are we doing here? And so, at that point, it's like, was he just in one kindergarten class and saw children walking in the hallway and is like, okay, I'll just go with them, or, I'm just going to get lost in the building. Who knows? And so she calls the office, and she's wanting to make sure John gets to where he needs to be. And she calls the office and tells them, like, hey, I just want you to know, John Winters, I don't know where he's supposed to be, but can we get somebody to bring him to the class he's supposed to be in? And so they start looking at the roll, and there's no John Winters at that school. Little kindergarten John had not registered for class at all. And at this point, John is like sweating and just like crying and terrified and doesn't know what's happening. And so, like, you could probably guess, if there's a kid in a school who's not registered to be there, his parents have to be wondering where he is. Maybe his parents think he's supposed to be there. And so, as like the office is starting to go through their protocols of, we have a child that we're not supposed to have, my mom, with some teacher intuition, goes up and squats down next to John just to comfort him a little bit. And he is just like weeping, and the whole class doesn't know what to do. And poor John, just like terrified and isolated. And she goes, hey, buddy, it's gonna be okay. Is your name really John Winters? And he goes, and so she finds out his name. He is on the roster. And she goes, hey, why did you say your name is John Winters? And this little kid goes, because when you called my real name, he said I wasn't here and I didn't know what to do. Which is incredible. First off, John Winters is an A+ name to think of on the spot as a kindergartner. But it is bizarre to think that this poor little kid was just going about his life, and then somebody interjected something. It was like, he's not here. And he was just like, okay, I'm not here. I'm gonna have to figure out what to do. Could you imagine how absurd or insane that would be in your life now as like a middle school student, high school student, to just be like, oh, you said that I'm absent. I'm not here. Sorry, ma'am. My name's John Winters. And as like crazy and strange and hard to believe as that is, I think the reality is a lot of us, like, we are stuck in that way of operating when it comes specifically to the Bible. Growing up, somebody at some point was like, yeah, did you know the Bible's really confusing? And we were just like, the Bible's, it's so, I don't know what to do with this. And we never like thought to dig deeper. We never thought to lean into this and to like start studying it and growing and learning. And so now, however many years later, anytime you open the Bible and you're looking at it, you're just like, oh yeah, I forgot. This is confusing. Why should I even try? But what if it just was confusing, but that's not where it has to stop? What if this book, the things in this book were actually wonderful and powerful and life-changing and beautiful and transformative? What if there is life in this? Now, it doesn't mean it's not confusing. It doesn't mean that you open the Bible and you never have questions. But what if we move from like just deciding that it's confusing to saying like, oh, this part confuses me. I want to learn more. And we start from confusing, and we let that drive our curiosity. That's why I love this series so much. And tonight we get to lean into what is now my favorite gospel. For those of you that don't know, the Gospels, those are what we call the 4 books of the Bible. They give the biography of Jesus. So it's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And so tonight we're going to lean into my favorite one. It's the book of Mark. And if I'm being honest, like the first time I started reading Mark, it was confusing. There are things in it that it's like, I don't know what to do with that. I don't really know what that means. But as I've grown and I've studied and I've learned and I've read it over and over and over, it's my favorite gospel. I love it so much. There are some themes that take place through the book of Mark that stand out. Like one of them, it is like action-packed movement everywhere. So if you start reading the book of Mark, you'll start to realize it's always like Jesus was doing this and then immediately did this. Jesus was doing this and then immediately did this. Soon after that, he went and did this. And then when that was done, he went and did this. It is fast-paced action. Jesus is always doing things. It is full of miracles, of Jesus healing people and providing for people and casting out demons, all of these things that Jesus is doing. But there's also a couple themes woven throughout the book of Mark. One of those themes, as you read through it, is actually taking from an Old Testament prophecy. It's the title, Son of Man. And the Son of Man, before Jesus shows up, it's this prophecy that existed for generations. And the belief was that the Son of Man would come to earth on the clouds, and this person would actually be full of God's power. He would be full of all the authority that comes from the creator of the universe. And as he comes down to the world, to earth, all of the power of God comes with him. Every knee will bow. Everyone worships. Evil doesn't stand a chance. It's the image of, like in a movie, a superhero movie, the final climax of the scene. It seems like the enemy, the villain, is going to win. And then in comes the superhero who's like reinvented themselves and have all of these power. And you know, as soon as the music changes, the superhero shows up, this ball game. That's the Son of Man. And so all throughout the book of Mark, Mark is showing how Jesus actually is that. This like all-powerful, unstoppable, godly, like divine deity that is going to rule everything. So when we see that, then you start to look at the miracles Jesus does, where Jesus tells demons they have to leave. And it's like, oh, of course they do, because it's the music has changed and the superhero is here and evil doesn't stand a chance. Well, when Jesus goes and he tells someone's body that the body is to be healed and the blindness gone, it's like, oh, of course. Because Jesus is the Son of Man. He is this all-powerful ruler who now walks the earth. And so brokenness doesn't stand a chance. So all through the book of Mark, as we're reading, we see all of these themes of Jesus' power and how he's the Son of Man or the Son of God and the expectation that comes with this like all-powerful ruler. Which is why it's so interesting that we have that mixed with this other theme that that once you look at it, it doesn't look like they should go together. When you look at this other theme, it seems completely like exclusive, like these two things as oil and water cannot go together. And I think one of the best places we see these themes really forced to like fold in together is in Mark chapter 10. In Mark chapter 10, that's what we're going to read tonight, we're going to look at tonight. And as Mark chapter 10 is continuing on, Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. They're on the road there. And when Jesus gets to Jerusalem, he will eventually be arrested. He will be put on trial. He will be falsely convicted. He will be tortured, and he will be executed. And Jesus knows that's where he's going, and that's where he's headed. And before this passage, we actually see where Jesus tells his followers, his disciples, hey, this is what's about to happen. But then we see this in Mark chapter 10, starting in verse 35. It says, then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him. They said, teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. Which this is kind of funny. Like, all of the disciples are together, and James and John, these two brothers, are like, hey, Jesus, can we, they can stay over there. Like, can we just ask you something? We know that you're about to be this all-powerful ruler, and we have a question for you. And as a side note, if anybody comes to you and says, hey, I'm going to ask you something, do you promise you'll do it? The answer is no. And the answer is always no. But let's see what the question is in the next verse. He says, what do you want me to do for you? He asked. And they replied, let one of us sit at your right hand and the other sit at your left in your glory. James and John knew that this title, Son of Man, was going to show up with power, that the time was coming where Jesus was going to be like the ultimate being on earth, that all of this power, all of this might was happening, and they knew that would happen. And in their culture, we see this a little bit today, but in their culture, you would have the most important person seated in the middle, and then to the right and left would be the second most powerful. And so James and John are like, hey, we know power's on the way. Can we call dibs on shotgun? Like, is that cool if we just like, save him a seat? It's going to be fine. I'll sit there, he sits there, you can be in the middle, and we'll rule the world together. It's this desire for power. They know Jesus has this Son of Man prophecy that he's fulfilling, and they want that influence. They want that power. And so let's see in the next verse how Jesus answers. He says, oh, you don't know what you're asking. Can you drink the cup that I drink? Or be baptized with the baptism I'm baptized with? Kind of a cryptic, like weird question. But this cup, to drink the cup that I drink, that's a phrase that was commonly used for like, this cup that I have this is something God has given me. And as Jesus goes into the rest of his statement and the rest of this passage, this cup refers to another prophecy. It is something that God has put in the hands of Jesus to hold. And the interesting thing is this is the prophecy that doesn't seem to connect. Because remember, Jesus is all powerful, and when a person is the ruler of all creation, and when the person is going to have this kingdom where everything submits to him, common sense would tell us that king can have whatever he wants. That ruler can have whatever they want. Which makes it so fascinating that Jesus starts to pull in this idea from a prophet named Isaiah. Isaiah existed 700 years before Jesus. And in one of his passages, one of his prophecies, he starts talking about what's going to happen one day in the future. It's this, not the Son of Man, but a suffering servant. And so here's what we're going to do across all of our campuses. We're going to open God's word, and your youth pastor is going to come up, and we're going to dive into this passage, Isaiah 53, 3 through 5. And keep in mind, this was 700 years before Jesus, and what Jesus is about to say is pointing to this passage and saying, hey, this is me. So let's read this together. So it's kind of contradictory to read those passages and to see, hey, there's someone who is going to be beaten and pierced and stabbed and whipped and killed, who is going to suffer so that other people don't have to. And when you think of power and how power dynamics work, the person who is going to suffer so that other people don't is not the one that sits on the throne. The scapegoat is usually the person with the least influence, the least strength, the least power, where somebody just says, hey, you hold this so that I don't have to. And in the book of Mark, we see Jesus saying, hey, I'm the Son of Man and I'm the suffering servant. It goes together. And it's kind of funny to see this next verse when he's like, hey, can you hold this cup? Can you endure this baptism? And they're like, we can, they answered. And Jesus said to them, you will drink the cup, and you will be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with. But to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared. James and John are like, yeah, sure, man, whatever. Like, we just want the power. We want the status. We want to sit to your right and your left. Like, whatever it takes, we're fine. And Jesus is like, oh, bless your heart. But also, like, as a follower of mine, you will, to some extent, suffer. You will, to some extent, have to endure similar things. And we see in this next verse, verse 41, when the 10, so those are the other disciples, when they heard about this, they became indignant with James and John, which, like, obviously, if all of your best friends were with somebody that you knew had power, or like, with, you were in class and two people go to the teacher like, hey, can you just like, forget them? Can you boost our grade up like 2-letter grades and it'll just be secret? Of course, the others are mad. And so they start like fighting a little bit, bickering a little bit. And then we see in this next verse, Jesus brings them all together. He calls them together. And listen, if you're zoning out at any of the campuses, right now is the time to lean in and lock in, because what Jesus is about to say might be some of the most important words that Jesus says in the book of Mark. He says, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles, so of the people who don't know God, they lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must become your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even if the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Here's what Jesus is saying in this passage. He's saying, listen, the rest of the world, the way the rest of the world views power, is they have power for the purpose of lording it over others. Power is about building up your own strength at the expense of other people. Power is about taking what you can and exercising like oppressive domination over the people around you. They gather power, they build their kingdom, they build their strength, they build their popularity, they build their status, and in order to do that, they step on anybody that gets in their way. That's the way the world views power. He's talking about when leaders find themselves pursuing oppressive domination and unfair, cruel use of power, trying to gain their own status by taking advantage of others. That is how humanity views this thing of power. We see it all throughout human history. We see it all across the globe right now. But even when Jesus is speaking, the Jewish people have been conquered and are being ruled by the Romans. He said, hey, the world is going to tell you when you have access to power, you should use it to protect yourself, which means you should use it to flaunt it and lord it over others and remind people that you have that status and they do not. And I love the disruption that Jesus brings to that. He says this, it is not this way among you. The rest of the world says power is to be hoarded and power is to be used to manipulate and hurt others to make yourself better. But it is not this way among you, among those of you who follow me, among those of you even today, CR Youth, who say, yes, I believe in Jesus. It is not that way. Jesus doesn't say, hey, one day in heaven it will be different. He says right now, effective immediately, that is not how it goes. Power does not exist in this world for you to gather and build so that you can bring pain or hurt to other people or make other people feel less than. He says, hey, the Son of Man, this superhero of the story, didn't come to be served, which is absurd to say. He came to serve. And the word there, the Greek word there that Jesus speaks is actually like the word for waiting on tables. In other words, the world is always going to tell you that your life is all about gathering status and followers and influence and popularity and notoriety, and that when you have those things, you can pull away from others and you can focus on yourself. But here's the problem. When you are only focused on yourself, you cannot focus on anyone else. And when you cannot focus on anyone else, you don't serve anyone else. And if you're not willing to serve anyone else, you will never love anyone else. This life of following after Jesus is a countercultural life where we do hold on to the power that we have through Jesus and what he does in our life. And also we hold on to this suffering servant where we look to the world and we say, hey, it's not about me. It's not this way among us. It is about serving others. And so I wonder for those of you tonight who say, Jesus is my king. Like I'm part of this. I wonder what it looks like to serve. I wonder what it would look like to make yourself intentionally in a place where you are able to put others first and focus on them. For those of you that have notoriety and popularity and influence, what if you started using that not for your own self, but to help others? In just a moment, your youth pastors are going to come up and help process this of what this could look like. But before they do, let me pray. Jesus, thank you so much for today. And thank you, Lord, for all of these students and the influence you have given them and the voice you have given them and the skills you have given them and the abilities you have given them. And God, would we be a people who, when the world tells us it's all about what we do, that we say, it's not that way with us. We're here to serve. We're here to love. We're here to be for others. And we are going to use our power to help and to serve others. We love you, Lord, and it's in your name we pray. Amen.